Bienvenida, bienvenido al mito de ser humano. Muchas gracias por estar aquí, muchas gracias por regalarme un poquito de tu tiempo. El día de hoy, en este episodio, les traigo una entrevista que surgió a raíz de una charla que di ahí en un evento que hubo hace unas semanas de la red de transición. El evento era práctica de transición. Y ahí estuvimos varias de las personas que estamos en el proyecto de Voces de Transición. Y antes de dejarlos con la entrevista, que por cierto está muy padre, Michael me hizo preguntas muy buenas. Este, Quiero dar un poquito como de contexto de cómo voy, de lo que he estado haciendo, porque de cierta forma estoy utilizando este podcast para, pues, como para ir archivando mi viaje, ¿no? Y la exploración que estoy haciendo en los temas, pues, que tanto me apasionan. Rápido. En el proyecto de Voces de Transición, ahí en la red de transición, em, básicamente lo que estamos creando, somos como la primera generación. Este es un proyecto que se quiere hacer a largo plazo. Somos la primera generación y de lo que trata es, la red nos quiere dar como una plataforma para pues, para potenciar nuestras voces, ¿no? Y hablar de los temas que están pasando, pues, tanto en el tema local como en el tema bioregional, pues, en el tema nacional, ¿no? Y temas, pues, que nos parecen importantes que se hablen y, pues, correr la voz, ¿no? Esto apenas está empezando, es como un proyecto piloto, entonces, en realidad nadie está seguro qué es lo que va a pasar, es parte de la aventura, entonces, pues, estoy muy emocionado, pues, a ver qué pasa, ¿no? Y yo ya terminé como todo el programa de capacitación que nos dieron, y la idea es que podamos dar charlas como similares a TED Talks, algo así, pero con un enfoque, pues, al tema de la transición, de lo que implica ser un agente de cambio y hablar, pues, del momento en el que estamos ahora como humanidad, ¿no? Y luego quiero, bueno, en ese mismo tema, en la entrevista hago comentarios, sobre las redes, que es un tema que para mí es súper importante. Este, y obviamente, hablo de las redes que yo conozco, de cómo están desconectadas, de cómo están aisladas, pero yo diría que la mayoría de las redes que pretenden hacer, cambios en su localidad, en sus territorios, a nivel local, global o bioregional, como sea, siento que nos está costando mucho trabajo identificar cómo conectarnos eficientemente, ¿no? Cómo conectarnos a diferentes niveles. Y eso es lo que estoy, en gran parte ahora investigando a través de las conversaciones. Lamentablemente, siento que es un tema que muchas organizaciones ni siquiera se han cuestionado, entonces, pues, no todo el mundo quiere hablar de estos temas porque, pues, de cierta forma invita a una reflexión que tal vez no hemos hecho, ¿no? Y tal vez, pues, no sé, siento que tal vez pueda ser incómodo para unas organizaciones. Pero bueno, yo seguiré buscando tener estas charlas. Este, y otro tema que les quiero compartir ya muy rápido para no hacer esto largo y dejarlos con la entrevista, un tema, pues, probablemente el tema más importante para mí, sobre mi investigación de imaginación colectiva. Este, Originalmente, me estaba perfilando para hacerla ahí en Ecosur. Ecosur es una universidad acá de Chiapas, acá en San Cristóbal, pero, pues, cumplí como los requisitos, la mayoría de los requisitos. Hice el Ceneval, el Exani 3, me fue muy bien, saqué 40% más de lo que piden para ingresar, hice el TOEFL. Lo que más trabajo me costó fue conseguir un doctor que me asesorara en mi tesis, pero es un requisito que piden. Hablé con 4 doctores de COSUR y nadie me agarraba la onda, nadie me entendía, porque obviamente lo que yo estoy investigando, pues, es algo muy innovador, ¿no? Y reta mucho las formas actuales de pensar. Pero llegué con Antonio Saldívar, él es el director de COSUR, y él inmediatamente me agarró la onda. Entonces, bueno, ya tenía mi proyecto de investigación, lo estuve trabajando con Antonio y con Abraham ahí de COSUR. me ayudaron mucho a darle como un poquito más de estructura académica, ¿no? Académica. Y mis calificaciones de la universidad de hace 25 años, o más de 25 años, la verdad es que a mí nunca me gustó, más bien no me gustaba lo que estudiaba, como que no tenía claro ni qué quería hacer, ni qué quería estudiar, y me enfocaba más como en otras cosas. Y total, mi promedio de la universidad fue lo que me impidió entrar a Ecosur. Lo que pasa es que mis calificaciones venían sin promedio y yo tenía esta historia que me había hecho de que para salir de la Universidad Panamericana tenías que tener promedio arriba de 8. Y resulta que no. Mi promedio fue de 7.7, entonces, bueno, me eliminaron de la convocatoria. Pero todo pasa por algo. De hecho, para mí fue una confirmación radical de que está muy bien enfocada mi investigación, porque el planteamiento de mi investigación, el problema que quiero explorar es principalmente, entre otras cosas, nuestra forma de pensar a corto plazo. Yo estoy postulando que esta forma de pensar como a corto plazo muy reduccionista es como la fuerza subyacente que nos está llevando, que impulsa estos sistemas de destrucción, ¿no? Y de explotación humana. Entonces, el que me haya negado el ingresar a tomar esta maestría y sobre todo hacer la investigación pues, que quiero hacer por un número de hace 25 años, fue a mí como, claro, es que claro, tiene mucho sentido, sí. Entonces, bueno, ya no quiero hacer más largo esto. Voy a hacer mi investigación en un mes, la voy a hacer allí en otra universidad mucho más relajada que se llama Montreal, principalmente porque me interesa mucho hacerla en un entorno natural. Quiero, quiero que conectemos pues, con la naturaleza, ¿no? Que sintamos nuestra interconexión e interdependencia durante el laboratorio, ¿no? Entonces, bueno, por ahí voy y traigo aquí unas notas porque luego se me olvidan cosas y sí, voy a estar subiendo ya todo a YouTube. De hecho, ya está el canal. Estoy haciendo clips de las conversaciones. Si de repente te da flojera ver todo, y quieres solo ver segmentos cortitos, tengo ahí un playlist de puros segmentos cortos de conversaciones que estoy editando. Y también estoy subiendo las conversaciones completas ahí. Por ejemplo, la entrevista que voy a subir hoy está en inglés, obviamente, pero bueno, la puedes ver en YouTube con subtítulos, ¿no? Si es que no hablas bien inglés o quieres con subtítulos, pues en YouTube la puedes ver. Y pues bueno, ya los voy a dejar con la entrevista. Les voy a platicar muy brevemente de qué va esta padre. Hablo un poquito de mi historia, de cómo es que llegué acá. Hablo un poquito de las lecciones que este viaje me ha dejado. Es que Michael hizo preguntas muy buenas de la incondicionalidad de lo que yo pretendo hacer, de lo que estoy haciendo, ¿no? Hace Michael una pregunta muy buena de, del conflicto que hay entre estas formas de pensar y de hacer, eh, que el sistema capitalista nos hace ver todo como una cosa, como un objeto, y yo lo estoy proponiendo algo como un regalo, ¿no? Lo estoy dando sin esperar nada a cambio. Entonces, es parte de lo que hablamos. Obviamente hablamos de las redes, que es el tema que estoy explorando ahora. Y hablamos de mi investigación de imaginación colectiva y hablo de uno de los objetivos pues, que quiero ver si emerge, las islas de coherencia. Estoy muy interesado en ver si a través de estos ejercicios, de esta exploración, de esta toma de conciencia individual y grupal y reflexiva también, se pueden empezar a crear grupos ciudadanas que estén interesadas en hacer cambios en su territorio, ¿no? Y por ende, pues en el futuro, ¿no? Porque al actuar en el presente estamos actuando en el futuro. Entonces, bueno, ya no quiero hacer esta intro más larga. Muchas gracias de nuevo por estar acá y las dejo con la entrevista. Muchas gracias. Hasta pronto. Chao.
Alex would be it. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Michael.
I heard from a little birdie that you went through some sort of transformation that I have the sneaky feeling it's not too dissimilar to mine, but I'm just basing this on assumptions. And so my thought was, why don't I just go ahead and hand the stage over to you, and then you can tell us, well, you can confirm or dispute what the birdie told me.
Well, that birdie is certainly well informed, Michael. Yeah, I worked in the corporate world for close to 25 years, something like that. I studied in Guadalajara at Universidad Panamericana. That's a Catholic private school, probably the most elitistic school in Mexico. I didn't want to study there. My parents, mainly my mother, she wanted me to have like that background, that religious beliefs. And well, I studied there, and then I started working immediately. I hadn't even ended the college, and I was still working because my father, he believed that, well, one should like work his money, right? So because I wanted to go out, have fun, I started working very young. And before I ended college, I started working in IBM, and that's when I like entered the corporate world. I worked in IBM for close to 3 years. And then I realized I really wanted to have the experience of living in Europe, and not only visiting, like living in Europe. So I decided, like, okay, if I'm going to do this, it has to be now, because later on, if I get married, whatever happens, I don't know, I want to go now. So I went to Europe, to Barcelona, to study also an MBA. I was really focused in this narrative of maximizing profit, and I lived there for 2 years. It was really a great experience because I got to experience another culture. It's incredible because it's the same language, but it's completely different. I mean, it's completely different. And I stayed there for 2 years, came back, and kept working, returned to IBM, but the project that I was in, it got absorbed by Sanmina SCI. It's close, like Foxconn. They produce a lot of micro parts. Guadalajara, it's like the Silicon Valley of Mexico. So I worked there for 4 or 5 years, and then my father passed away. So my mother approached to me, and she wanted for me to get into the family business. It's a auto part shop. I hated that business. I didn't like it at all. But my mother, she was like, she already also passed away. My mother, I couldn't say no to my mother. So I quitted my job that I really liked, and I got into the family business that I hated, and I stayed there for over 5 years. And then, it's a long story. I got into other jobs. I worked in third-party logistics, always with a mindset of maximizing profit. Always. It was the only thing it's important, it's to maximize profit. And then I had this job in a corporation, and after 5-6 years of working there, I was really efficient in my work. The owner comes to me and he says, "You know what, Alex, we're having difficulties because one big customer got out. I'm offering you to pay you 50% of what you earn, or you have to get out." So I said, "No, I'm leaving. No way I'm taking that." So then I was close to 40 years at that time. I was around 38. And it came to me, okay, I don't know if being an employee, it's like serving me, because I am doing a perfect job, but because they are paying me a lot, they can't afford me. So I decided that I didn't want that life of being an employee anymore. and I started a business, like a record store slash pub, with my ex-wife. It was probably the business that the one business that I really loved. It was like really beautiful to have a record store, and we had a lot of craft beer, and it was really fun to talk all the time about music and beer, two subjects that I really love. But after a while, at that moment, I was really in a dark spot in my inner world. I was like super negative. I couldn't enjoy life. It came this moment in my life when I was at Radar. The place was called Radar Records. We were at Radar, and the place was packed. It was like, wow. And we had several weeks really good. But then one friend comes to me in the bar and he says, "Hey, this is amazing. Wow. You should be really grateful, for this, all the abundance." And I couldn't connect to that feeling. I couldn't feel it. I was only watching the negative stuff. Oh, those clients, they need someone to go clean their table, whatever. I couldn't connect to that joy. And that was the first moment when I really recognized that, okay, it's not good here. Something's really wrong. I couldn't connect to that joy. And then, my transition came in waves. Not long enough, my ex-wife asked for the divorce. I was completely depressed, anxiety, and in one moment, I I almost tried to take my life. And then, then it was like, okay, I need professional help. I can't get out of this like mess that was my mind, my heart, my being. I was like 40 kilograms overweight. I used to be like super, super fat. And okay, I need help. So I started therapy, and then I started to change. And I started like, I had never worked in my mind before, it never. And when I started going to therapy, something started like changing in my mind, in realizing that I could change the way I think, and months passed by, and I started like doing more inner work, like reading a lot. uh, and then came this super strong moment, that when I came to the awareness that I didn't love myself. And that was the moment when like something broke inside me, and I said, wow. I cried like I've never cried before. Just recognizing that I, I didn't not only didn't love myself, I hated myself. I treated myself like really bad. So, I did a lot of inner work for like super intense for close to 2 years. And then in 2019, I came to the realization that I had enough with cities. Since I was reading a lot of epigenetics, and a lot of stuff, I came to the realization that how the environment deeply affects us. If we live in really chaotic cities, like really this environment, it affects us, because we are interconnected to life, to everything. So I moved to Bacalar. I decided I had enough, and I wanted to go a place with really beautiful nature. And thankfully, we have that a lot here in Mexico. And it's like, okay, I'm going to Bacalar. And I lived there for 1 year. And my purpose going there was to connect initially with myself. So I started meditating, like really doing inner work. And also, one of my objectives was to connect to nature. So I went to swim to lagoon every day at 5 a.m. to see the sunset. Sorry, the sunrise. And then meditate there, take a swim, and I did that every day for 1 year. And then the pandemic came. So it was something like, I don't know, April, June 2020, something like that. And Bacalar was completely deserted, no tourists. So I kept going to the lagoon, I didn't care. It was the pandemic. I went to the lagoon. And then one day, this is probably one of the most amazing experiences I've had in my life. I was there all by myself in the lagoon, and there was no one there. It was completely empty. And I don't know if you've been to Bacalar, but for me, it's like it's almost like a paradise on earth. Just watching the 7 different shades of blue, completely peaceful, surrounded by mangroves with life-breathing stromatolites, the oldest organisms in Earth, over 3 billion years old, and just sitting right there next to me. So I get in the water with this acknowledgement of the privilege to being there in that paradise. And it just came in 1 second. It is really complex to explain it because it all happened like in less than 1 second. It was like the realization, the privilege of being there, being able to bathe in that waters, and at the exactly the same moment, it came the realization of that maybe that surely that ecosystem, because our current ways of thinking and being and doing, we will destroy it. So I started like crying, like I came to a catharsis, like super joy and super sad. And for the first time in my life, I was disgusted of being human, of how we act, of how we destroy and how we live. And that was it for me. When I got out of the water, after several minutes of this deep catharsis, is okay. This is what I'm going to do with my life. And then I started exploring more, kept reading, and I started joining several organizations. And in particular, I found a Transition Network, and then I started reading Rob Hopkins. And when I read his book, From What Is to What If, and haven't written, this is an important fact. I previously read the Kybalion. I don't know if you have read it. It's a really old book about the universal principles that it says that all is mind, and the premise that Rob in his book, he talks about our crisis of imagination and how at the core of our current meta crisis, it's our lack of imagination. And when I read that, it was, yes, this is it. This is it. This is what I'm going to do with my life, serving life through imagination, through challenging our worldviews, the way we think, our inner narratives, and how we relate to ourselves, to the world, to life. And that's what I've been doing. Exploring imagination, it's a complex issue. And now I am working with other friends. We are doing a workshop about integrating collective imagination practices mixed with somatic practices like movement, breath work, attention, challenging these narratives, and at the same time, like trying to act in our territories by deciding what is that we want to bring to life, what is it that we want to create in our locality. I really believe that change, it has to start local. Obviously it has to be global, but local, it's where we can affect, it's where we can act. So basically our objective is to create like islands of coherence, small groups of people, like that they can see through the current worldviews that are destroying life, and that we act in our communities to steward life, to propel life. And that's kind of my 10-minute story, Michael.
No, thank you very much, Alex. Obviously when you started Islands of Coherence, right? Did I get it right? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Interesting concept, and especially if you think about it, then because there are all kinds of means of communication, and a lot of it is the feeling that we are moving in a certain direction, and that doesn't necessarily always have to be spoken. It's something that we can feel. And within these islands, you don't necessarily always have to have a bridge, a physical bridge from one island to another to convey that feeling to the other island.
Yes.
So this one I can definitely follow. But very often when we have an idea, and sometimes we make some progress, and then we go back a little bit, and under the adage, one step forward, two steps back. I'd be curious to find out that on that journey that you have decided to put all of your energies towards, how has that journey been? Because I think that it's not always the positive things, but the lessons learned that are quite useful for everybody. So I'd be keen to hear
Yeah.
yours.
Well, to be honest with you, my main learnings are like inner reflections. I truly feel that our crisis, it's a crisis of, it's a human crisis. It's a crisis of humanity. It's a crisis of values. It's a crisis of beliefs. It's a crisis of worldviews. For me, we are like not telling the story correctly. I would like invite everyone to stop saying it climate crisis and start saying it humanity crisis, because for me that's the real crisis. We are so embedded in the stories that money will bring us happiness, that we are separate, that we need to work constantly for something that we don't even know what. It's just the stories that we've been told since we were young, and those stories were told to our fathers, to our parents, and to their parents, and to their parents. So for me, we need stories that challenge this current paradigm. I would say that that's maybe my biggest insight, like having the courage, the will to challenge our mental structures in a loving, empathical way. Basically, that's the core of the work that I want to do. It's how can we invite people in a lovingly, caring, empathically way to challenge the way they think, the way they act, because for me that's the crisis. It's not a climate crisis, it's a human crisis. And that's, I would say, that's my biggest insight. Yeah.
You've gone through a path that's kind of zigzags, and that's not unusual. Very often we go and follow the way path. We don't know exactly where it's going to take us. We certainly don't know when we're going to have that aha moment like you described. But you open your arms to people, and the if I could use the phrase, you do this in an unconditional way. You just offer it without expecting anything in return. But people haven't taken your path. They are perhaps not ready to accept something that's unconditional. They just cannot hate, they cannot cope with it. I'll go out at a level and say that a lot of people will feel that they are not worthy. They are not worthy of your unconditional. So how do you deal with that?
Wow.
That's the truth, though.
That's a very good question. Yes. I would recommend everyone to connect with nature, because if we see nature, if we allow ourselves to get out of our concrete boxes and go to nature, we will see that nature is unconditional. The only condition of nature, it's evolution, it's regeneration, it's interconnection, it's interdependence. That's how nature works. The thing is, we are so disconnected from nature, from ourselves, from our inner wisdom, from our inner love, that we see this in a fractured way. As you say, like, oh, I'm not going to do it, because I feel separate of everything. For me, this separation is one of our biggest issues. And in my experience, I have found out that nature, our mother nature, is where we can find these answers, and not in a mental way. It's experiential. You need to go without like your mind, and just like be let yourself to be aware. I'll give yourself permission to feel, you know connect with nature, to amaze yourself with a sunset, to amaze yourself with a caterpillar, with a bird, uh, allow yourself to be curious, to feel the wind, in the water, that gives us life. And it's not the things that we have built that brings us life. They just bring us commodity, pleasure, distraction. But at the end, nature is what holds us, what gives us life. And when we go out to nature with this curiosity, with this willingness to connect, and do this work of how am I feeling when I go to nature, when I enter the space, call it a lagoon, a lake, a forest, the ocean, whatever, and allow yourself to really be there, be as present as you can. And then when you get out, do this work of reflection. How am I feeling now? And I can guarantee you that if you do that work of reflection, you will come to the awareness that we are nature and we are not separated. It's just our mind and our current systems that makes us feel that way. Yeah, I would say, like, go for the answers in nature. Yeah.
In I was debating whether I was going to ask you this question, but you've left me with no choice.
Go, Michael.
There's a very positive way. You mentioned in the beginning of your story that you went to a parochial school, very much tied to religion, and I might be wrong with this assumption, but I think the role of the Catholic Church is still strong enough in Mexico, where you live, and perhaps even more so in the countryside. How do you see God after your journey?
Oh, yes. Good question, Michael. Mm. Well, for me, God, it's not a word. For me, God is a way of being, a way of relating, a way of thinking, of imagining. Mm. God represents for me love, unity. Uh, you know, our 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 true nature, because for me, we are all like sparks of God. We just need to consciously work in that to bring it, to bring it to being. Um, for example, I really believe religions uh, should completely change. I don't think most religions are serving us. Religions tend to to get filled with dogmas and structure, and they divide us because it's if you're not in this religion, if you're in other religion, then you are not right, you are wrong, and they just divide us. For me, the path that has worked for me, it was like, and this was the biggest work I had to do with my mother, because in a way I gave my back to the Catholic Church. But since I've done that, I've never been more spiritual in my life. So that's the change. Spirituality comes from inside, like from your core, and religion comes from outside. And for me, God lives inside me, and lives inside every one of us, inside of every being, inside of the cat that lives here in the house, inside of a tree. But we humans, because we are conscious, because we are able to think, to imagine, to create stories, to have these kind of conversations, we have more challenges to come to this realization of the God that lives inside of every one of us. And I know some people might hear this and say, "One," but a lot of spiritual traditions have been talking about this for millennia, no? And in fact, in the Christian traditions, there are some scriptures that didn't get included because they challenged that notion, no? Because the Christian religion, for example, they tell you that, like, God is in the temple, right? It's not inside each one of us. So for me, that's God. God is inside me. God is inside you. God is inside of everything. And when we recognize every living being as a God, the way that you see every other person changes. For example, now when I see any other human being, I see it as a godlike being. Like, it's like, thank you. I appreciate your life. You're here. You're beautiful. You, whatever you are, right? The thing with us humans is, as I have said, our mental structures, the way we think, the way we act, but that's just stories, and we can change the stories. And yeah.
If we agree that we are part of nature, it's being human beings, that we are not the focus, we are part of something bigger, we're part of nature. In following your analogy that God is to be found within each one of us, then maybe God is nature.
Yes. That's exactly, well, for me, that's it. In fact, I have a small place where I meditate every day. And let me show you this.
Mm-hmm.
For me, this is our God. This is our goddess, our Mother Earth, right? For me, that's it. That's the closest we are in this life, in this shape, in this human form. The closest we are to a God, it's our mouth, and we are part of it. We are the same. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Maybe if we can move on to some of the organizations that you're dealing with, because obviously, again, your journey, I don't think your journey is unique. I don't think it's unique. I think that there are others that have taken the same path. But very often our problem is in dealing with trying to come up with ways to move forward, and be it an organization, or especially if it's a global organization. And you described it earlier in our talk that You feel that the impact that you can actually deliver is much more on a local level.
Yes.
But you also mentioned that it's necessary to coordinate things on a I'm going to call it a macro level. How is that working for you?
Wow, that's a good question, Michael. A very good question, I would say. Wow. When you become a change agent, when you decide like, okay, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life, you start to notice how everything in this change agent world is extremely disconnected. It's crazy how disconnected it is. So it's not going good. I mean, but I know it's when I entered this world, I knew it wasn't going to be easy. That's why I really believe that potentializing local efforts, and then the challenge comes to connect globally. Mainly the funding issues. That's I would say that's a tricky part. To how to fund the projects, the local projects. If the local governments are not promoting that instances, it's complicated. And what I have seen, the big organizations that work internationally, they tend to isolate themselves. For example, Transition Network. I love that organization. I really believe that one of the core dialogues and conversations we should be talking about, it's our failure of transitioning, because that is what we are failing at in making a transition. So the transition organization, it's encapsulated inside them. Gaia Education, for example, the same. A lot of organizations, they are just working, following their own objectives of organization. But when I started noticing this is, shouldn't we start like having dialogues and conversations of how can we interconnect international and local and bioregional organizations that are aiming to create a brighter future, like a future where life exists, a future where we can transition to systems that doesn't destruct everything. And I really feel that this is one of the most important conversations that we should have having. As Paul Hawken in his book, I don't remember what the name of the book, but he has this amazing book about how in the last 20 something years, there has been an incredible explosion of organizations trying to act. But why are we disconnected? Because obviously it's super challenging to interconnect our objectives, our purposes, our values, But I really feel that if we dedicate maybe 1-2 years to that work in finding out how can we interconnect organizations, eventually we will accomplish multiple goals just by being interconnected. So for me, that's the challenge. How can we do that? Because as returning to your question, it's not going good because we haven't found. That's how I feel. We haven't found a way to really interconnect. Talking of organizations, because it's challenging, and I would invite everyone like to get out of your organization like an eagle's eye view, and how can we do it, and create spaces to have conversations about this. I would say multidisciplinary spaces to gather lots of different visions, because I would say that this is, for me, this is the biggest challenge of humanity. How can we interconnect organizations that want to transition to a future where life is possible. And yeah, so it's not going good, but since I am really committed to serving life, I really find a lot of hope in serving life. And since I am committed to that, I completely trust her, trust Gaia, trust my Mother Earth, our Mother Earth, that she will help me with it. But this is the question that I say to everyone I have conversations with. Let's have spaces to have this dialogue and invite the people who work in these organizations to have these conversations. How can we do it? And if we do this, then I can imagine a fast transition to different futures. Yeah, that's the challenge, Michael.
And for you personally, Onyx, what sense of impact would be enough for you?
Wow. Well, right now I am working here in San Cristobal de las Casas. I'm working with an urban observatory, a citizen observatory. We were hopeful that the new government that just got in like 6 months ago were able to have the disposition to have open spaces to have conversations, to have like these kind of questions and have a dialogue, an open dialogue. But sadly, we now know the objectives of the president, and it's not good. So in here in my life, I see a lot of challenges. It's not easy. It's important to be a part of a community that it's larger, and but it's not only the local community. It's also the bioregional and the international communities, because you always need help. You always need help. I would love to, the impact that I'm most hopeful about, and I'm really, really eager to see what happens, is with my investigation about collective imagination, because our purpose, as I said before, like creating small pockets of islands of coherence, that really brings me hope. Like I can imagine, for example, if it really kicks out, and if we are able to create a powerful toolkit or a methodology that obviously it will be shared, and we can help communities to empower their own community and to create these islands. I can see a lot of islands starting to interconnect, and that brings me a lot of hope. Imagining these islands of human islands of people to making change in their communities and sharing their stories, inspiring other people across their community, across the bioregion, across the country, across the globe, and to acknowledge that change is possible. We just need people that are conscious and willing to do changes initially in their personal lives, because you need to, as I said, you need to first challenge yourself, change yourself. That's also very inspiring for me. Like if I can help a few people, whatever number it is, to change and to challenge the way they think and the way they act, that would be enough for me. Like that's the work that fills me with joy, with hope, and yeah, that would be it. Yeah.
So you stayed on impact. That's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have maybe a story that you can tell us of something that you were able to make happen locally tied to the Islands of Coherence that we can all use as a if I can phrase it, as a beacon of hope?
Yeah, I would love to. Yeah, we have started investigation. Is not start. I'd love to have this conversation again in a couple of months and share those findings with you. But in the Citizen Observatory, what brought us together was reviewing a program it's an urban development program. Basically, that program wants to reduce our natural protected areas. It will reconfigure San Cristobal de las Casas completely to other thing. And we detected a lot of irregularities in the process. Initially, it was illegal. So we got together, we reviewed the program, and we stopped it. And for me, that's super inspiring. We are the only community in Mexico that accomplished that. Because the last year, there was a lot of urban development programs all over the country. And we were the only one that stopped it, that said, no. And for me, that's super hopeful that when people get together, when people act on something, when people have a common purpose, that's super important. You can accomplish amazing things. And we did it. Yeah.
To what degree do you think that perhaps events that took place in your past might have helped you in a way that you couldn't have expected to make that happen, that you were able to hold the barbarians at bay, that maybe something that you went through earlier in your life helped you to make that happen today?
That's a good question, Michael. Mm.
If we believe
Yeah,
that nothing happens by chance,
yeah, of
and
course.
if you think about your personal path, which you've already described to us,
Yeah, yeah,
and that it's something that people might have had similar paths, but they
yeah,
didn't have the same path. They didn't have the same path as you. It's only,
yeah,
that's something that belongs to you. So my
yeah,
question is, was there something that you can maybe tie from that of what happened prior that allowed you to have certain capabilities to make that happen?
yes. I would initially say hope. I I had hope that before I didn't have. Hope hope came for me when I started connecting with nature. Yeah. I had hope that we could do it, and also the tenacity, to act, because it was over 600 pages document. It was a super intense work, and we had a time schedule, so we needed to act fast. And I would say also an ability that grew a couple of years ago, an ability to be present, to listen deeply, to understand other peers, other people, and I would say also to care deeply of the future generations, because the impact that this document will have in the future of San Cristobal de las Casas is devastating, because it's the zonification of the whole area. If this happens, this territory will completely be transformed in 15, 20 years, like completely. So having the empathy and the love for the future generations, for the current children that eventually they will grow, that really propelled me to do it. And I didn't have that before. I didn't have that inner powers before,
Wow,
and I do now. Yeah.
that's wonderful.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, when we
You,
when we are able to like activate these powers that we all have, we all possess. We just need to activate them. And when we have a strong intention to activate them and a common purpose, it's almost like magic. It's something that holds you. When you are like feeling like not as hopeful, but you have these core values, these core like inner powers that they hold you. They hold you. Yeah.
Can you think of any approach, or perhaps certain messaging or certain opportunities that would be quite useful to propagate the idea of the islands of coherence? Because you were talking about we
Yeah.
need others, and that
Mhm.
you're obviously, that's quite clear. We all need each other,
Mhm.
but I think that you're talking about something much more specific, and perhaps if you can elaborate in things that, if you had them, would
Mhm.
enable you to make much more progress tied to the islands of coherence.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. Well, initially, of course, there's the money issue, right? Because I am creating this with my savings. I mean, no one is giving me money, and I invest a lot of hours into this. Initially, I was reading and studying in this investigation for 6, 8 hours daily because, again, imagination is super complex. So the money issue, connecting with foundations that are interested in bringing this to life. Uh, Other would be like sharing the word. Like, how can we talk about this? For example, the conversation we're having now. How can we make it like cross generational? Like, how can we involve different people? How can we make it in a way kind of viral? Because our attention at the moment, it's so captured by I would say it as it is, by stupidity, by distraction, by stuff that it's almost never relevant. We are addicted to distraction, to films and to media. So how can we make this viral? Uh, Also, alliances. That's in fact what I'm looking to do right now. Creating alliances with universities, with spaces that want to explore on this, so we can have like the spaces to do the research. And also, I would love, but it's sad because it won't happen. I would love to be able to collaborate with government, but the status quo, the government as it is, they don't want people having these kind of conversations. They don't want people challenging their way they think. So at the moment, I will leave the government out of this imagination. And I would say also, how can we connect to, as I said before, to global organizations? How can we interconnect this? Uh, and for example, I don't know if you know Margaret Whitley. She speaks a lot about of islands of coherence also. Um, she has an amazing book that I really recommend to everyone. It's Who Do We Choose to Be? And she speaks about the importance of these islands of coherence. The thing is, for the challenge is how can we integrate them? And to doing that, we would need what I was saying. Media, for example, I visualize influencers, people that have large bases of people that can share, can spread this message. The funding, the money, the political actors, and I hope they will sometime will shift the local organizations, the local NGOs, the international NGOs. For me, the complexity is how can we integrate all these into intentionally creating local small islands of coherence. And that can happen fast. If we manage to interconnect, I can see that happening fast. We have the tools, we have the knowledge. I was just reading a amazing book of International Futures Forum. They have a lot of tools. I mean, we have almost everything we need. We lack the agency of the people, the willpower, the time to commit, because then we return to the money issue. I need to pay the bills. I need to work. So most of the time you are working in a system that extracts from nature and exploit humanity. And in that way, we are feeding the system that it's destroying us. So the first challenge is, how can we, in a way, get just a step out of the system for us to work in a third horizon, in a possible future horizon, so we can have one foot in the current system and one foot in the systems that we want to create. But to do that is super challenging. For me, that's super challenging. When you have children, for example, when you need to pay school, all these day-to-day challenges, how can we do it? And you go back to the money issue, right? So yeah, we need funding for this. That's at the core, the money issue, unfortunately. Yeah.
We both know that it wasn't always this way.
Yeah.
There was a time where we didn't have this dependency on money. So I'm thinking we're not talking about something that would be completely new. Actually, it's very old. So we, as human beings, we did it for a long time. We were able to manage without money.
Yeah.
So I raised the question, why, if we know how to do this, why don't we just do it?
Well, in my case,
we know how to do this, right?
Yes, of course. It's our human nature, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, we have been captured by our current systems. And when I say captured, I mean all of our bodies, our mental bodies, our physical bodies, our spiritual bodies. We are submerged in these stories that tells us that we need to work a lot to destroy nature, And the thing is that it's complicated. I mean, I don't have any children, but I can totally relate to a father, to a mother that has 2, 3 children. And when you go to them and say, hey, can you dedicate 3 or 4 hours a day to creating islands of coherence? They will probably say, no, because I need to work. I have 2 jobs, because I need to pay rent. I need, and of course, I mean, they have their children to care about. And for them, it's the most important thing. And I completely understand. Of course, yes, they are. But, nature, it's what holds our lives. It's our support system. And, how can we do this? It's super complicated. And it's sad that we always return to the money issue, right? It's like, that's like the tricky part. How can we do it without money? I mean, I'm doing it without money, but I'm paying it with my own money. But I mean, I would say that's a really challenging result, Michael. Yeah.
I didn't say it was easy.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that we did it that way for a long time.
Yeah.
So it's not a question of whether we can do it or not. We did it. We did it.
Yeah.
So really what we're talking about is a systemic change.
Yeah. For example, imagine that we create local currency here in San Cristobal de las Casas, and that we value equally people that are creating islands of coherence, for example, like me, or the people that will be facilitating the space with me, and but we value that, and that we, with this local currency, we support the people just by creating a systemic change. And that, for me, that would need local currencies, local value, local empowerment, and local involvement of the people to make this happen, because it requires time, it requires energy, it requires a lot of things of you. And you said it perfectly. We need a system change. That's basically it.
And I see that I'm getting close to the end of my show, the time allotted for my show. So I'd like to close the circle, staying with that idea of system change, and going back to something that you mentioned earlier, that reading Rob Hopkins' book was very much inspiring for you. So how about if you and we take a trip down to Transition Town? There's a concept of Transition Town. And part of Transition Town is this idea of self-sufficiency. That means you don't need anybody else. We have everything that we need right here within the community. I'm going to say, within this island of Coherence, we have everything that we need. Do you see any possibilities based on what Rob did, either in Kinsale or perhaps what the original idea of Totnes? Do you see anything that was done there that you can use that would help you in getting closer to where you want to be?
Well, yeah, definitely. I really what they are doing, Ruth Van Tobin with where, for me, that's one of the most inspiring things I have seen. Like creating a large scale collective imagination processes, imagining together possible futures that doesn't require almost anything. You have it there, and it gathers all the community together. And the thing is that every territory has its own challenges. And we have, for example, here in our territory, we have a lot of different challenges that they didn't have, for example, in Totnes. So every territory has its peculiarities. But I would say Transition Town all over the world has brought a lot of hope, a lot of inspiration, a lot of tools that can help inspire us. But every territory has its challenges. So I would say that what they did is beautiful, but it probably won't be much of service except for inspiring us. Because here, knowing where I am and knowing the territory, knowing the people, knowing the Mayan cultures, knowing that we are a colonized nation, that we lost a lot of our traditional heritage because of the colonization, we have a different set of challenges. That, for example, that didn't happen in England. They weren't colonized in the way that we were. And we here, for example, if you look at myself, I look like a European, but I am Mexican, but you see this mixture, and a lot of people have a lot of different beliefs and worldviews here. So each territory has its own challenges. But concretely, what I have said, the collective imagination processes Ruth is holding, I would say that's, to me, that's the most inspiring that Transition Network has created. Yeah.
And I might be completely wrong, but I'd like to think that all of you, within your own island of coherence, the one that you're managing yourself, that you have something that they don't have in Totnes. That's my
Of
gut
course.
feeling. Yes. So we cannot just go ahead and say, obviously, the challenges, and we all have different challenges. But if I can close the circle and going back to your own unique story, that as long as we remember that uniqueness and that gift that each one of us can bring, then that means that there's something that you all have collectively that the others don't have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. And we go back to how can we share this? How can we enrich all the human soil across the globe with our stories? Yeah,
Your challenge, our challenge,
exactly.
and but we know what we need to do. At
Yeah,
least we think we know what we need to do, and certainly in next steps, I think we're very clear.
yeah.
Alex, thank you very much for your time, and I really enjoyed hearing about your own personal story, and obviously, I have a strong connection to a lot of things that you said, and I would like to keep the conversation open to see how together we can get you a little bit closer to those islands of coherence.
Thank you very much, Michael.